The poverty line is determined by the U.S. government and changes as the cost of living and wages change over time. Your text states that about 1/5 of the U.S. population lives at or below the poverty line, which means over 60 million people. The majority of those that are in poverty are children. About 2/3 of those in poverty are under the age of 18. If you make even $1 a year over the poverty line, you're not calculated into this figure. Many of those that are poor have jobs. They just don't pay well, or it's intermittent or part-time work, and those jobs have few, if any, benefits as well. The poverty line was established in the 1960s during President Johnson's War on Poverty. It was calculated by considering the food needs for an individual or for their family and multiplying that cost by 3. This is the official poverty line. It truly doesn't allow for adequate housing, food, and also for cost of living expenses, even at the most minimal level. A sociologist would be interested in knowing the distribution of poverty amongst different categories, such as geographical distribution, race and ethnicity, education, gender, or age. As you can see here, poverty is more prevalent in the southern states than it is in the Northwest and Mid-America. We often have images of urban poverty in our minds, in part because there's heavier news and media representation of urban areas, and there's a higher population density, which results in greater awareness. But as this map shows, poverty is greatest in the South, and this has been a pattern for over 150 years. And we don't think very often in terms of rural poverty because we don't see as many images of it, and it's somewhat hidden from view. Rural poverty is at a rate of 16%, which is higher than the national average of 15%. We also don't tend to think about suburban poverty, but now more and more of the nation's poor are living in the suburbs. But the greatest predictor of poverty is race and ethnicity. Minorities that are in poverty are overrepresented relative to their rate in the general population. If one looks at the rate of each race or ethnic population in the U.S., 12% of all Asians are in poverty, over 27% of African Americans and Latinos, and 31% of Native Americans are in poverty. These rates are well above the general population levels. We also need to consider a phenomenon called the feminization of poverty. Those that are married are much less likely to be in poverty. Women are particularly vulnerable to poverty if they're single, and the children that are with them are often drawn below the poverty line. Thus, you could say that a big predictor of poverty for women and children is the family structure. Part of this is because women earn about 72 cents on the dollar compared to what men earn. While a working class man's income could lift him out of poverty, that same income translated to about 72% could easily drive a family income down below the poverty line. Contributing to this is the high rate of divorce in our country and the large number of births to single women, making female-headed families more common. Certain age groups are more likely to be in poverty. As we said earlier, children are 2/3 of those in poverty. The elderly are actually less likely than the general population to be impoverished. Government programs help protect the elderly from poverty. Programs like Social Security, subsidized housing, food stamps, medical care have all helped reduce the poverty rate for the elderly. Education also seems to have a big bearing on whether a single woman will give birth to a child. Those with the highest educational attainment are least likely to have a child outside marriage, while those with the least education are the most likely. This in turn affects also the poverty rate of women and children. The same is true for income. The higher the income of a single woman, the less likely she is to give birth to a child as an unmarried person. There have been various theories developed about why people are poor, and they often focus on individual attributes, such as deferred gratification or the culture of poverty. However, because sociologists study the social structure, they understand better than most other fields that the social structure provides advantages or disadvantages to certain classes of people. Your author provides an insightful view of the interplay between structural issues and personal ones in the box called Down-to-Earth Sociology, Poverty, A Personal Journey. He admits that sociologists understand the connection, but also that it's very hard to unravel this connection. Which is the cause and which is the effect? Do they somehow reinforce each other? For instance, medical problems can make it hard to work, and then the lack of insurance and resources may make the medical problems harder to cope with and making it harder to perform the job correctly. Or lack of role models and available opportunities may undermine the rewards perceived regarding an education, which of course then affects the ability to access higher paying jobs. You can see how there's no one cause and effect, but rather it's a dynamic relationship.